Welcome and get ready for a front row seat on Icons with Ava Johanna, the live show that is raising the bar in the entertainment space worldwide. You're about to be right in the middle of heart-pounding conversations and real-time connection that ignite transformation within. Our global live show stars the industry's powerhouses, visionaries, and cultural icons. Together, we'll walk the path of legendary entrepreneurs, influential business moguls, celebrities, and iconic brand architects. Join the conversation, seize the opportunity to engage directly with icons of their industries, and immerse yourself in an unparalleled learning experience. Icons isn't just a show. It's an opportunity to step into the minds and hearts of industry leaders and run with their advice. So grab your popcorn because this is the space where icons are born. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Icons. It has been a minute. It's been 2 weeks, which feels like a minute because we were doing a lot of frequent episodes over the last 6 weeks or so. And I feel so honored and so excited because we are coming back better than freaking ever with a guest that I have been so excited to have on the podcast, not only because I had the opportunity to attend one of her masterclass webinars on public speaking, creating TEDx talks, but I also had the pleasure of meeting her in Scottsdale when I went for the mastermind event. So without further ado, I want to share with you our beautiful guest today, our talented, inspiring, motivating guest, Ashley Stahl, who's the founder of Wise Whisper Agency. She has ghostwritten over 100 TEDx talks. She is someone who, from the public speaking lens, is going to support all of you today that have a dream to stand on stages and share your story, share your expertise, share your gifts. And I know that so many of you have that desire, have that dream, want to do it, or have already started doing it and are looking to up level. So I cannot think of anybody better to have on the podcast than Ashley today. So Ashley, thank you so much for coming on Icons. I'm so excited to dive in.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm honored to be here with all of you.
It's going to be a good conversation because I know whenever I have a million questions myself, that means that we're going to be able to go so deep. And as you're a podcaster as well, so it's like the people that you have on when you're like, I have literally a Rolodex worth of questions for you today. They're going to be the best conversation. So again, thank you so much for your time. I'm so curious if you could just give everybody a little bit of a background on how you even got to this space with public speaking. Your story is so cool to me. And I just think it would be such a great place to kick us off before we dive into all of your magic.
Yeah, where do I even begin? I grew up in a house where the news was always on, and I kind of always had an opinion about politics. I don't, for better or for worse, I don't even know if it was education backed. My dad just, my mom's side of the family was on one side of the political aisle, my dad's was on the opposite, and everybody would fight at Sunday dinner. And I don't know, I just got fiery about it. I was also really good at learning languages. Like at a young age, my mom had me in Spanish. In middle school, I became fluent in French. And so I was always drawn to cultures. And one thing I loved about language was that it always helped me understand people in such a unique way. Like even, I don't know, being fluent in French, like if you say bonjour, it means good day. And it's like that's different than hello in English, right? So it was like language became this portal for me to understand people. And then when 9/11 happened, I just remember, any millennial knows where they were standing when 9/11 happened. It's interesting. It's kind of like 9/11 affected the careers and the lives of millennials in the way that the pandemic impacted Gen Z. Like Gen Z was in the middle of college and then their whole life stopped pretty much, right? And then I think millennials during 9/11, it was like a lot of us were in high school. And it was like the whole world changed after that. Flying changed after that, travel. And so for me, those experiences and that way of being just made me want to help in some way. And I poured everything into a career in national security. I ended up getting into counterterrorism, working at the Pentagon during the Obama administration. And what was so profound about that was that I got offered a TEDx talk when I was, I think 23, 24 years old. I was at an awards ceremony for my work in national security. And I remember this woman came up to me and she looked like she had this like ray of light around her. She was so beautiful. And she told me that she'd just spoken at TEDx in the UN. And I looked at her like that would be something I could happen, to do one day over the rainbow. And she looked back at me and I said, maybe one day I'll do that. And she looked at me like, well, I'm sure you will. And it was almost like her tooth like shined, like ching, like a cartoon. The next week I was in Istanbul for a work assignment. It was 2012. It was when the protests were in Turkey. And I got a text message and there was like tear gas in the air. And I remember, hiding for cover. I think I was in like a spice bazaar. And I saw this text of, hey, Ashley, I recommended you for a TEDx talk. And I remember thinking like, oh my gosh. And it was like 2013 at this point, 2012.
Wow.
And so I remember thinking like, what do I've never even spoken on a stage in my whole life. So, and I don't even know what to talk about. So I ended up, going back to the hotel. They emailed me, they asked for a speaking reel, didn't even know what a speaking reel was. I Googled on my iPhone, like, I don't even know what iPhone it was in 2012, like iPhone 2.
Yeah.
Is what it feels like. What is a speaking reel? Realized very quickly I had nothing to do with one of those. I had no assets to get me there. So I ended up propping my iPhone against the bathroom mirror and recording myself with the curtain from the bathroom shower behind me as a backdrop. And I gave some sort of weird speech, and people ask me all the time, have you looked at it? And to this day, I'm like scared to like go into my email and look at this. I'm pretty sure I sent it via like WeTransfer or something that I can't get anymore. So that's the story I've been telling myself to not have to look at it. But
Yeah.
by some sort of miracle, I got the TEDx talk and it was at Berkeley and it ended up going viral. I ended up going up to one of the speechwriters in the Obama administration and said, can you give me some tips? Like I've never spoken before. He structured out how to give a speech. He's like, all right, it's 9 minutes. It's this many pages typed. This is how long your story should be in the opener. This is how you should do it. I ran with it, went viral. And then fast forward, 9 years later, I gave another TEDx talk because I was kind of cringing over the fact that no matter how grateful I am that the first one went viral and it was about how to figure out your career path. I still cringe at the fact that that was my first speech of my life. Like, can you imagine your first try public speaking being everywhere, being the thing that's how people see you as a speaker? And so that just motivated me to give another one. And the second one I gave in 2019 was called How to Figure Out What You Want. By that point, I had already had a speaking career. And that is the one that changed my life. Because of that 2019 TEDx talk, I attracted a speaking agent. I went on a speaking tour. My speaking fees went from $5K to $30K per talk. I got 6 book deals that came after me, a spokesperson deal for 4 years, and about $2 to $3 million of revenue came my way. So it was
Wow.
just like a life changer, the second TEDx talk. And that one, the first one probably brought me about $1 million of coaching revenue in my practice. But it was the second one that really just opened my eyes. And now that one is ranked in the top 100 on TEDx. And since then, I created a Wise Whisper agency and we're a completely done for you process. We meet with clients over 4 Zoom calls and we write and we book their entire TEDx talk. So the commitment on their end is really just an intake form and 4 calls and we take it from there. And the reason I started this agency was because I just feel like this is the highest way I can help people with the gifts that I have, seeing how much the TEDx brand has influenced me. And I'm actually not affiliated with TEDx in any way at all. And we can get into it with any of your questions, but there's a lot of reasons I'm happily not affiliated with TEDx. I see myself as an entrepreneur that understands the platform, but is not working on behalf of or with the platform in any real way. And I love that about the business that I have because TEDx has a lot of boundaries that I don't play by.
Yeah. Your story is, like I said before you started sharing it, it's so cool to just see the evolution. And also just like, to me, I always think about how incredible it is to witness the, not necessarily surrender of it all, but the like serendipity of it all. It wasn't like you went out and looked for it. It came to you. And it was something that a doorway that you were kind of ushered through by external forces. And then through listening and saying, okay, yes, I'm going to do it, even though I have no public speaking experience, your entire life change. So I love stories like that because I think that so many people listening probably have had those moments and have either said yes or maybe were like, oh, I don't know, and talked themselves out of it. And so I just think it's another example for everybody of what happens when you say yes to the things that are pulling you forward, often external circumstances as well. And I'm curious because obviously there's so many different types of public speaking gigs that you can book. And for me, I have always been invited into either corporations or friends events through word of mouth. And I know people that have done TEDx, such as yourself. My ex did it as well. What is the benefit of choosing to start there versus maybe doing other public speaking events and opportunities that are outside of the TEDx world?
Yeah, I mean, it's just a powerful stage. I think, clients come in all the time, and because entrepreneurs are achievers and a lot of our clients are entrepreneurs, some of them are doctors and authors, but they'll be like, how do I get on the best TEDx stage? And I always tell them, like, consumers don't really know the difference between TEDx San Francisco and TEDx Timbuktu. It's really about that YouTube brand asset and the brand authority. So I would say, like, speaking anywhere versus TEDx, like, the TED and the TEDx channel both have 40 million or so subscribers. So that is a huge algorithmic opportunity to just get your name on the map. And I think a TEDx talk has many different authorities. Number one, it can establish you. It's almost seen now as a given on the speaking circuit. Like, if you want to command even more fees, like, this is something that I think a lot of people want to show up to the plate with. The second thing is, algorithmically, if you go viral on TEDx, it ups your value as a speaker. It makes you more competitive. And that's just literally because you can show that more eyeballs have wanted to hear your message. I also think TEDx is really potent for career pivots. So I think a lot of people who come into Wise Whisper Agency are corporates who want to make a pivot into full-time speaking and entrepreneurship. And it's kind of like TEDx is the highest way to put themselves on the map as a speaker. And there is a big difference between TED and TEDx, and there's a lot that people don't know about it. So for example, again, I'm not affiliated with them. I've just kind of studied the brand. And what I've learned is that TED licenses TEDx out, right? So there's around 13,000 TEDx events that have happened around the world, and maybe a couple of thousand of those are active at any given time. So anyone can go to the TED brand and ask if they can host a TEDx event. And with a certain amount of money put into the event and a certain amount of approvals from the TED brand, you get a license to run it. Not all TEDx events are created equal, right? Like, when you think about TED, it's pretty much invite only. Like, you think about Bill Gates and people like Bezos or Steve Jobs, you think about those personalities. When you think about TEDx, you think about entrepreneurs, all sorts of different people on there. And also different TEDx events, how big their license is, usually, not always, by how big the event is. So my first speaking engagement was at TEDx Berkeley. It was 4,000 people in attendance. That means that the event has been running long enough for TED to trust them to give them the right to have more people at the event. So the smaller events usually mean smaller licenses, which means less trust from the TEDx event. We have not really booked clients for any TEDx events that it's their first time running because we don't want our clients to be guinea pigs. And so, yeah, there's so much there. Another thing people don't know is if you go viral on the TEDx channel, you get picked up by the TED channel a lot of the time. So both of my TED Talks that went viral, my TEDx talks, they got that 40 million people hit in the TEDx channel, and then they get taken onto the TED channel. They get a second wind. And then from there, TED has translation service providers, and you're more likely to get translated. So the list kind of just goes on all the opportunity that really exists for you. But it starts with a TEDx talk, and I just don't know of anywhere else that this many eyeballs exist. And what I think is so potent about that, especially as like someone who identifies as a female entrepreneur, is like, I feel like a lot of entrepreneurs, we eat what we kill. Like, we go out there, we hustle leads, and we eat what we kill. And it's like, it's so challenging. And I think, especially if we don't have our marketing set up properly, we're earning
Mhm.
every single lead. And what I love about TEDx is it became this brand asset, this engine that was bringing things to me for the first time in my brand. So after all of these years, it just felt so refreshing to feel like, wow, when I look back, I wrote over 600 blog posts for Forbes. I was a Forbes contributor for a long time.
Oh my goodness.
I have not gotten, in my experience or awareness that I can think of, one opportunity on par with all 600 of those blogs compared to what my 9-minute TEDx talk has brought me. And so when I think about that 9-minute talk, that first talk I gave, for 3 months, I would go to bed at night seeing that red ring on the carpet and having like little hyperventilations. I think that's what, it really stressed me out. And I told people after, I'm like, this is 51% the best thing I've ever done for my career, 49% the worst, because the stress that I put on myself. But when I think about 3 months of stress, like preparing for that talk, doing it right, which I tell all of our clients, you really need to memorize your talk. And, a lot of clients get intimidated by that, but I tell them, like, look, TEDx talks are anywhere from 9 minutes to 18 and a half minutes, 18 minutes. Why write a long talk? Let's write you a 10-minute talk. That's 3.5 pages. That's very easy to memorize.
Mhm.
But when I think about that and I think about the prep, it's like, oh my gosh, that 9 minutes did so much more for my career than all 600 blogs or other things I've done. And I'm just forever grateful that the opportunities that I'm attracting through these things really have that ROI, that 80/20 value. And it makes me sad that there's so many entrepreneurs out there that are overworking themselves.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, that piece alone is so massive. Like the nerves that you might have going into being on that stage, it's far worth it to just swallow the nerves and do it and show up and lean in, because you're right. Like it is a lot of work if you don't have your marketing set up, if you're doing everything organically. And, I've been talking about this a lot lately. The world of online marketing is changing within itself, and we're having to adapt post COVID to how people are now buying online and interacting online. And so I just think that this is a way for people to stand out. But I want to address the elephant in the room, which you kind of already shared about within your own experience. For the person who doesn't really have speaking experience, maybe they coach, maybe they, have a social media channel, and so they show up on their stories, so they have some experience showing up, but they haven't ever spoke on a stage before, and their heart is like in their belly right now thinking, holy shit, my first talk on TEDx. What is your advice for that person who maybe does have that nerves, or maybe has a little bit of imposter syndrome around, like, could I really even do this?
Well, you first have to remember that what's so great about the TEDx brand in my experience is that it's a democracy. They're not looking just to have famous people speak on stage. And that's why it was my first talk of my life, right? Like I came on there just like anyone. I think the second thing is you're not alone. You've got a pretty good amount of time, right? So we write our clients talk over those 4 Zoom calls over 2 months. You can hire a writer if you don't want to invest in our services and get help. So if you don't identify as a writer, I think the worst thing you could do is write your talk by yourself. And there's many different price points to find writers, right? Like we happen to have ones that have written New York Times bestselling books and movies because that's what we do. But I do think that even a good friend of yours that is a good writer, you can sit with and figure out the structure. If you watch my 2019 TEDx talk called How to Figure Out What You Really Want, it's a pretty good example of speaking structure. That structure I learned from that speechwriter in Obama administration forever ago. We still use it as a company to this day, years and years later. So if you look at my 2019 talk, you'll see a structure like this. You'll see an opening story that's really compelling. I close out the story by sharing my talking points of what I'm going to share. And then I go into point number 1, point number 2, point number 3, and then I have a conclusion. That's it. So if you think about that, that's a 19-minute talk. So that's around 6 pages typed. You don't have to write a 19-minute talk. You can write a 10-minute talk. That's 3.5 pages. So typed. So I would first get your structure right, and then I would get the right support. I also think that sometimes we don't, a lot of clients come in and they don't actually know what their message is. And, we have a creative director on the calls, whether it's me or we have a creative director who worked at Apple and did decks for Steve Jobs and wrote speeches for his executive team. So we have pretty talented people here who are pulling the magic out of the client and directing the speechwriter. And I think that's important to remember because you just have to know, like, you can't go at this alone. So we write the speech over a couple months. And, a speech can take our speechwriter up to 80 hours to write, even if it's short. So you can give yourself the time now, but it's kind of a chicken or the egg thing. Why would a TEDx curator take your speech as an event planner if they don't know what you're going to say? But why would you write a speech if you don't have one booked, right? It's like chicken or the egg. I would say take the time off of your calendar, even if it's quite a bit of time, get a writer to help you and write out a speech. So that's the first thing. And it doesn't mean you have to send the whole speech to them, but you have something drafted. You have some bones that are there to support you. I think the second thing is realizing life is a numbers game. So I proudly am pretty looped out of our booking team, but we have 6 people on our booking team and we guarantee booking, meaning we don't stop pitching you until we book you for TEDx. And so the fastest we've ever booked somebody is in 6 weeks. The slowest we've ever booked somebody is in 6 months. Or not 6 months, sorry, in 18 months, 18 to 20 months. So, it's a slow burn. And what that means for you is that it's really a numbers game. You have to put yourself out there. Obviously, we have a Rolodex of people and contacts that we know, but you can also just pitch yourself for these events and go onto the TEDx event site and just keep going until you get a yes, until you get bites. And so people just forget that really this is just a tedious project. And that's why I think we have so many clients coming in is because they don't want to set aside that time and they have the revenue to invest with us. When working with us starts at $30K per client. But I think if you don't have that, it doesn't make sense for you. You can put the tedium into it. It's just a personal decision. And I think that's important to remember. And that's something that I like to share with people because I like to feel like I'm being helpful and you don't have to work with us, that at least you have the understanding of like the kind of support you need. And you also need to know that once you get a yes, events usually run 1, 3, 4, 5 months out from when you get that yes. So you have plenty of time to start memorizing the talk then. You don't have to memorize it now.
Yeah, I think that was one of the most surprising things that I learned about TEDx. And maybe this was just the TEDx chapter or location that my ex did his talk at, but I think he got approved 6 months before it actually happened. And then they worked with him every single week. I think it was every week or every other week leading up to that. And so by the end of the talk, or when that talk actually happened, he had so much practice with it and it had been memorized for months at that point. And so I think that it can, from the outside, look really daunting because you maybe just see, the videos on YouTube with tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, if not millions of views, but they do a really good job at setting you up within TEDx. But then also when you work with somebody who's been around the block, who has the experience, who's done it again and again and again, like, I just think that what you're offering is so valuable and like such a no-brainer for anybody that is serious about creating a speaking career. I'm curious, you mentioned that after doing TEDx, you were able to increase your speaker fee. And I know that a lot of outside of TED, the TED brand, a lot of these events are either only really paying a lot for their keynote speakers or not paying anything at all for the smaller speakers coming in. So I'm curious, like, what your transition was in the very beginning from maybe doing something for free versus paid, because I know that TEDx is free. And I was wondering if you could speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, that's such a good question. I do feel like for a long time I was the paid speaker, and I think TEDx was just, at first, my first TEDx talk that went live in like 2013, 2014, that attracted a lot of speaking engagements and obviously a lot of invitations for free speaking and paid speaking. I took everything because I wanted to get my experience. I wanted to build a reel. You can look up my speaking reel on YouTube as an example of a speaking reel. I will tell anyone who looks that up. There's a few things that I think are not great about that speaking reel. Number one, it's too long. It's like a 3-minute speaking reel. You really should have a reel that's 45 to 90 seconds, right? Number two, my message isn't that clear in that speaking reel. I have really good testimonials, I have really good footage, but it's not clear, like, this is what my message is, this is what I'm getting across to audiences. It's like, it almost just shows like I'm great and I'm awesome, but it doesn't make it clear. So you want to have a clear message that comes across in your reel. But those are just a couple of things. A couple mistakes people make with speaking reels is they don't have enough footage on there, and it makes them look like they're not seasoned. Like if you just show footage from 1 or 2 media interviews or 1 or 2 speaking events, it just doesn't make you look like you're really established at what you're doing, and people subconsciously see that. So I would say I was the free speaker for like 3 years. It wasn't until like 2016, 17 that my talk had officially gone viral enough, gotten a lot of views. I was pursuing my second talk. I built my speaking reel. I built another speaking reel that I started to get the confidence, like, all right, I'm just going to start saying no. I also was just busier. So I think, the speaking industry is quite interesting because a lot of people think that they need an agent to like get more speaking, but most agents don't want to represent you unless you have a lot of speaking already coming in. So it's one of those things where I did the front end work to be the free speaker. And the thing is when you speak impeccably and you're in front of a large audience, you never know who's in that audience. Like that builds your speaking career more. Like I got a lot of talks from people in the audience who watched me and we're like, hey, I have a corporate retreat. I'm going to connect you to this person. We really liked your speech. So if you want to be an established speaker, you really, number one, don't want to get an agent until you have enough business coming in. They don't want to represent you if they're a good agent unless you have business for them. And then, of course, it becomes this amalgamation of them also having opportunities for you, them also being able to bring things to the table. So, I would say, don't be afraid to be the free speaker, but also don't be afraid to stop being the free speaker. And, that looked like me replying to emails saying, thank you so much. A few questions. How long is the talk that you're looking for? What is your speaker's budget? What are you looking to compensate? Like these sorts of questions. And it's okay for you to start to let things go. So after I did probably like 20 free speaking engagements, I was like, okay, no more free ones for me. I have a speaking reel. I feel like I've practiced. I feel like I have one good keynote. And that's another thing people don't realize is that the best speakers in the world have memorized their talks. And, a big mistake you make in your speaking career is saying yes to too many talks. Like you don't want to say yes to too many topics and be constantly creating new talks because then you never memorize them and you're just diluting your talent and your skill set.
Yeah, when you hosted that masterclass inside of the We Shine Well community and you shared that, I was like, oh, yes, this is so big for me to hear because I think also when we're so multi-passionate or, our gifts kind of span across a couple different topics where we could take it in different directions. It's like, yeah, I'd love to talk. Like for me, for example, it's like, I'd love to talk on breathwork for abundance. I'd love to talk on breathwork for entrepreneurs. I'd love to X, Y, and Z. But when you said that, I was like, okay, what if I have this core talk that has the core 3 talking points, but it's just shifts a little bit based off of whatever audience is in front of me so that I'm not reinventing the wheel every single time. And I just had a talk on Friday at this event, and it was so much more, I would just say like chill and easy on my nervous system and like not as stressful because it's a talk that I've already done 3 or 4 times that is like ingrained in my body now because I have memorized it, I've delivered it. And so that was just such a helpful talking point. And I think also, in the coaching space, because a lot of coaches listen to this podcast, we're so versed in, oh, let me create a new masterclass, let me create a new training, let me create a new course, that we've got this like shiny object syndrome on always it having to be new. But there's just so much value in what you just shared on like getting that one topic, that one theme, that one talk, or maybe it's 2, and like getting really, really good at that because every single time you're just going to get better and better. So that is definitely a nugget that you gave that I was like, oh my God, I needed to hear this. And I also needed to hear the 45 to 90-second speaking reel, I'm like, I gotta go back and edit my speaking reel.
Yeah, totally. Totally.
So for somebody that doesn't have a speaking reel, where should they start? Like, do you just put your tripod up and like make it look like you got a background and start practicing your talk in your house? Like, what's your suggestion for somebody who's like, I don't have any of this. I
Yeah.
need to start at ground zero.
Yeah, I mean, all our TEDx speakers, obviously, I'm like, as soon as that TEDx talk is live, let's make a 90-second reel out of it where your TEDx talk is the background. I'm no lawyer, but TEDx has a lot of guidelines around like using their footage. Like you can only put yourself on their stage on your website. Like, so for example, we're an agency, we have hundreds of clients. We're writing 50 TEDx talks right now and booking them. We can't post pictures of any of our clients on stage, like because it's an issue legally. So that's why you see a lot of me on stage. Obviously, a TEDx talk is the best place to go for speaking reel footage. If you don't have that, you can go speak for free anywhere and ask to bring a recording, right? Like I spoke a lot at college classes when I was getting started. I was so motivated. And I remember asking a professor, is it okay if I bring a video person? And the class was kind of sparsely populated around the room. I asked everybody to come up front so that the video person could get the best footage of me speaking to people and not empty seats, right? So I I manufactured and created that myself. And I think that's something that anybody listening right now can take dominion over.
Yeah, that's such a good idea, especially getting everybody to move up to the front.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's super smart. Okay, so when somebody is more, let's say more seasoned at speaking, but hasn't necessarily started this like speaking tour, what is like what constitutes a speaking tour? How do you suggest like getting that set up so that they are speaking more regularly? I have a feeling like a lot of it is just like the numbers game of like reaching out to a lot of people and getting those things booked. But I have a feeling that there might be a lot of people who are like, where do I even start to find those opportunities?
Yeah, I mean, I think that honestly, life is a numbers game, and you really just, if you have any local university around you and you can talk to a graduate class, there might be a class that has more ideal clients, right? If you have a higher end service, you probably don't want to speak to the undergrads who don't have a job to pay for their services, but the graduate school might have. So I would just get more clear on like who is your ideal customer, who might be existing in those classrooms. We've had a lot of TEDx clients come to us and say that they're reusing our speech and they're expanding upon it, turning into a keynote. We had one guy in particular just come in and he took the TEDx and he made it kind of like a basic keynote for 15 minutes. He reworked it a little bit and he raised $2.5 million for his nonprofit. So
Wow.
in the audience, so there's many different agendas you can have with, a talk. So if you're looking to get clients from it, I would figure out where are your ideal clients and can you create a spreadsheet or even ask ChatGPT to make you a list. It's pretty nonstop amount of ways to get a list of places you can pitch yourself.
Okay, so you've mentioned a couple times the revenue that has come from these talks. Are you insinuating that with these talks you're actually pitching at the end, or is it just like indirect? People are inspired, excited about what you do so that they reach out and ask how I can work with you or how I can support you?
Yeah, I mean, I really haven't pitched myself that much. I mean, on interviews like this, sometimes we'll have a promotion. So, for example, anybody listening now, I guess I'll drop one. Like, you can, if you apply at Wise Whisper Agency website, we'll give you $1,000 off as long as you say that you came from Ava, within 90 days of this episode release and airing. So, I mean, that kind of a thing we'll do. And I just did one here just because you just like walked me straight into it. But like,
Yeah.
usually I actually won't, because it's revenue, that $1,000 off that we give, it's overhead, it's revenue lost, but we like to do it obviously for business development. So I think if you're speaking, giving some sort of promotion is always great. If you're in a season, for us, we always have we're 2 months backed up. So any new client that comes in, we're staggering their start dates. So we're not in a position right now where we're like trying to get much more business, but we are happy to have it. And so I haven't been doing the promotion as much.
So for people who, let's say they're booking in graduate classes at different universities. Do you see people typically, or when you were going into those classrooms, are you offering your services to those people at the end? The reason I ask is that I recently watched one of Russell Brunson's trainings on like webinars and like selling at the end of webinars. So it sounds like, at least from like his perspective, there's like a whole big pitch at the end. And I know with TEDx, that's like not a thing that you would
Yeah,
be
you're not
putting
going
into
through
your
that.
talk. Yeah. So I'm curious, like your thoughts on the pitch at the end. I know some people can feel like it can be a little bit like they're like so on fire and so excited about their talk, and then they go in to sell something and it's like all of their energy just collapses in. So I'm curious your thoughts on that.
Yeah, that's funny that you mentioned that because it's true. TEDx has a lot of guidelines around self-promotion. We are very careful in our speech writing because there's many different guidelines TEDx has. Number one, self-promotion will get you pulled down if you're overly self-promotional. But you want to remember that bio beneath your YouTube clip. You got to like 90 words that you can shamelessly lead generate from. So right under your TEDx talk, when they ask you for a bio, be intentional about those first 90 words because that's how people know about who you are and what you do. But as far as, pitching yourself, anything outside of a TEDx, I always ask event people, especially if it's a free talk, am I able to pitch my services? And that's a really valid and wonderful question to be asking if you feel like you're in a place where it's like, all right, I'm a free speaker right now. This is what's in it for me. I don't think there's anything wrong with, asking if you could pitch yourself to the event person.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like the free talks for me have been really amazing ways for me to just get the experience and build my speaker reel. And so something that even if it's a friend, I'm like, hey, if I'm doing this for free, happy to. Can I offer this, and can I also like get a high quality recording of this talk so that I have something that I'm walking away from this experience with. So as we begin to wrap up this conversation, I'm curious, like, just to like make this really simple, what would be your like top 3 do's and don'ts for a public speaking career?
I would say do write the talk before you have it booked. And own your lane, like really own your lane. Don't spread yourself too thin. We talked about that, right? Like, don't say yes to every talk. Like, when I was doing career coaching, I would get a lot of emails from corporations with hundreds of dollars worth of consulting, which, by the way, found me through my TEDx talk. And that's the thing, you get things you do want and things that you don't. And they would want me to talk about like the generational differences between Gen Y, Gen X, Gen Z. I could talk about it. But it wasn't my specialty and I didn't want a keynote. And if you make a keynote, you're going to invite more of that. I didn't want to
Yeah.
invite more of that. So I said no to that money and to that revenue. Um, so that's like, one thing I would say. And then another do is do work for free. Like, I think that speaking for free and mastering your trade is really important. Do get help. Like, don't write it if you're not a writer. And a lot of people don't realize, like, I'm really here to advocate for memorizing every word. I think the best speakers do, and they deliver a true performance. And I think that's what separates the wheat from the chaff. You know what I mean? Is having that extra intention into it, not just winging it. Too many people are getting on stage and winging it. And I think ultimately it's not creating the results that they want in their speaking career.
I love that you just said performance, because it really truly is a performance. And as someone who has sat in the audience many times and watched people speak and have been bored out of my mind and also so entertained and like on the edge of my seat, I think that it's something that we don't necessarily think about when we're like preparing the talk of like, what is the performance that I'm giving? And the memorization piece is a part of how you can actually make it a performance, right? Like if you don't have your talk completely nailed down, then how do you go beyond that and like add the entertainment factor and like the captivation of it all?
Exactly. Exactly.
So before we wrap, I have a question for you around virality. Since you have had 2 viral talks and help so many speakers across the globe be able to go viral with their talks, what constitutes a viral talk?
I would say there's a few things like it's like a it's like a, is it called a pink elephant gift party? Is it a white elephant?
White elephant, yeah.
Yeah. I don't know where I got pink. The white elephant parties, you know how you show up and there's like presents and you pick one. It's like nobody wants to pick an ugly present. Like if you're just looking at the wrapping, right? And that's what a title is for a talk. So if you don't have a good title, you're not going to go viral, and that's just what it is. So I would say it's super important that you're thinking about that. Um, Another thing I would think about is your opening story, right? Like some TED Talks open up, TEDx Talks, with like a conversational approach. They'll share like a knowledge bomb, like a statistic or something like that. Those are harder to go viral because after you shock people with the statistics, you get kind of conversational, and your conversation might not be enough to keep their attention. But storytelling usually keeps attention. So, past the title, you want an opener with a story that really grabs people's attention. I think that that's a really, really good move. And then, other than that, I would say real dramatic performance. Too many people are getting on stage and they're just saying words. And a lot of the times because they don't remember what they want to say because their nervous system takes over, and it's really stressful for a lot of people to be staring at you. So I would know your talk well enough where your nerves are not going to take over because the words are ingrained in your psyche way too much for that to happen. So I would just practice, 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 feel confident. It's kind of like studying for final exams. Like the test taking day is like the least of your worries because you've already studied, and your test taking day should really be the easiest day. And that's what I want for anybody that's giving a talk like these.
So good. I feel like this has just pumped me up so much. I'm like, all right, where else can I get my talk? And what other stages can I be on? Because I really do love it. I think that the performance piece of it is what's so fun, is that like being able to look out into an audience and see that people are like leaning in and they're
Yeah.
captivated. I mean, just like I'm leaning in and listening to you talk right now, like that, it feels so good to know that you're able to do that with something that you're really passionate about and to express yourself in that way. And I know that for many people, it can be really stretchy, but I feel like it's the kind of stretch that we as entrepreneurs and creatives should lean into, because it's an opportunity for us to grow in our leadership and also get our work out to the world. So I'm just so grateful for all of your wisdom that you've shared today. And I know that we've kind of been able to talk about Wise Whisper Agency throughout the conversation. I mean, it just seems like what you're doing over there is just like I was saying earlier, a no-brainer way for people to be able to bring their talks to life. So can you just share like a little bit about what it like the process of working with
Yeah.
you? Because it sounds like you guys do like kind of, it's like a one-stop shop, everything that
Yeah.
you need to get on a stage or get on the TEDx stage.
Yeah, just the TEDx stage. Like, so we only work with people on TEDx, like any other serve. We've had a lot of clients come back and say, can you write our book? And we make some exceptions and do other things, but pretty much like no other things happen without TEDx. So someone comes in, they can apply on wisewhisperagency.com website. They'll hear from us to set up a sales call with me or somebody on the team. If we end up thinking it's a fit, which we try not to even schedule the sales call if it doesn't look like we can book the person, because when somebody applies for a sales call, we send it to our booking team and say, can you look into this person? Do they look bookable for us? Because with our success rate being at nearly 100%, we want to be careful who we take on. We'll do a sales call. If it's a fit, you can sign up, and then your only commitment is an intake form. It's probably 2 hours of your time to really fill out. We ask you a lot about key events in your life, and our speech writing team and our creative directors start to take a look at that once you send it in. We need it before our first phone call with you. And then we do 4 Zoom calls. The first call is really about brainstorming. What is your talk? Where is it going? What topic is best for your career given where you're at? And then we kind of start to brainstorm, how are we going to open up the talk? What is the topic, and what is the story we want to open up with? And what are some possible talking points? In the second Zoom call, we present you with a partial draft of like the opener and how we might write your story. And we're really proud to say that that really goes well. Like, I just think our writers are so magical, that we present really beautiful work. And from there, we start to brainstorm the rest of the talk. In the second call, we collect your edits. We get the essence of your feedback so that we can channel that into the rest of the draft. We brainstorm the rest of where your speech is going to go based on you. And our creative director and our speechwriter is on all the calls. Our creative director is on most of the calls, directing the direction of the speech. But it's really just 4 Zooms. And so by the third Zoom call, we have a rough draft for you. We rip it apart, we go through it. And then by the 4th Zoom call, we are just doing the final polishes on the final draft. And after we're done with that, we send it on over to the booking team. So after it gets your approval, the booking team has your final draft, and we just get in touch with you if you make it to a second round. Sometimes different TEDx events need information from you. We'll get that from you. But we're entirely done for you. So other than those 4 Zoom calls you show up for, there's really not much else that we need from you.
That's awesome. So, okay, so the 4 Zoom calls, the talk is done. The booking agent has the talk and starts pitching you out. After that point, once you get booked, then you're kind of like working with TEDx to practice and bring the talk to life.
Yeah, sometimes if the talk says yes and they have a lot of edits for you, you own that relationship. So once we get you booked, we hand you straight to the curators. And if they want to edit or change the talk, we leave it to you guys to kind of do as you will with it.
Cool. Oh my gosh. I mean, I just feel like this is so brilliant. Just this your entire agency. I'm like, this is so brilliant, because I know that so many people just get in their own way, and it's overwhelming to look at a blank page or a blank Word document and say, what am I going to talk about? How do I even structure this? What's so interesting and captivating about me that I can share in a way that's going to resonate or going to go viral? So I just love what you do. I love that you've created a space to support more people in getting their magic out to the world, and to feel really confident in sharing it as well too, in a way that has been tested and proven to get bookings. So for anybody that is interested in exploring working with you, I know that you got a little bit of a wait before you can start taking people on, but I would love to just be able to link everything in the show notes. So if you could just share real quick, like where people can connect with you and your team, that would be awesome.
Yeah, I'm on Instagram at Ashley Stahl. So DM me, especially if you want the $1,000 off through listening to this. Just make sure you tell me you come from Ava. And yeah, wisewhisperagency.com, or specifically, if you want an overview of how we work, wisewhisperagency.com/TEDx.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming on Icons. This has been
Thanks
so
for
fun.
having me.